Welcome to Worldview India, Mr. Foreign Minister. If we had met on September the 10th and discussed Pakistan, I would have complained that Pakistan is a country which exports terrorism into India. Suddenly, Pakistan has now become part of in the vanguard of the alliance against terrorism. Are you convinced?
Obviously, after September 11th, the world, the different regional problems have not all of a sudden changed. They are there. What has changed is a consciousness that we are dealing with a much deeper and a much more difficult and a much more worldwide problem than previously had been understood, and that we are all vulnerable. There is no one that is invulnerable to this phenomenon. In this, there is a short-term and I think a long-term strategy. The short-term strategy is one which is to deal with a specific organization and the specific regime in Afghanistan. But a long-term strategy has to take into account the fact that there are unsolved issues, problems, and very often groups and countries that have helped, supported, or incited terrorist activities. This is something which I think the world international community will have to come to terms with in a way which is effective and resourceful and very clear. So I would say that today, yes, I think we have to recognize that President Musharraf has made a difficult decision, even though public opinion, I assume, and I believe you may know this much better than I, in his country is not happy with the military actions taken in Afghanistan. He has made a difficult decision, and that is important to recognize. But we also have to look for a future which will deal with some of the root causes in the region.
Do you get a sense, talk in Pakistan, here in India, now you're going to Tehran, that the world international community is ready to come up with a solution with an acceptable government which could contain the trouble in Afghanistan?
Well, I think, first of all, on the question of fatigue, two things are important. It is not, or it is maybe only a minimal part of this campaign against terrorism is the particular military action. One has to look at the continued diplomatic, economic, political activities that we all must undertake. I know India also has proposed a convention on terrorism, and this is being now widely discussed throughout the world. The second issue which you mentioned is the issue of the post-Taliban regime. Very controversial, I think, on one point, although everyone, I think, in principle agrees. Will there be any form of Taliban participation? However,
what impression did you get from your Pakistani interlocutors?
My impression is that they have a different position than previously as far as the Taliban regime. They are opposed to the Taliban regime. On the other hand, they are not opposed to the possibility of some Taliban participation in the future regime. Now, this may...
Will the international community accept that?
We have often been a victim of international community competition for spheres of influence, and what we have understood is it is very important to have a common approach to get the international community to work on a common framework, but at the same time get the neighborhood to work on a common framework if we want the voice, if you like, of the people of the region to be heard and not simply be used in exploiting one or the other interests of one or the other great power. Now, how do you do that in this situation is something which I think you, more than anyone else, I'm talking about India, but also the region here, can understand and can see how this can be done, this process can be done. But I think there are two principles here. One is that an accepted principle, which India also espouses, is, yes, a broad-based representative government, and certainly is very important, the central role of the UN in this process. However, I think that one could go one further step and say this, whatever government this is, must be a government which is ready to stamp out terrorism, not allow for these extremist type of activities to take place in its region.
The international community in all its manifestations is in fact even now trying to put together a sort of a statelet in Kosovo. You have the NATO there, you have the OSCE involved, you've got the European Union involved, and you've got the United Nations involved. In fact, there are some Indian officials there in Kosovo also. Does that look like some sort of a model on which to proceed in Afghanistan?
I would say that what we saw in Kosovo was immediately after the war was a black hole, really. And this black hole created instability in the region. We must avoid that in Afghanistan if possible. This black hole, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of institutions, the lack of representation, no banks, no type of...
That precisely is the situation even as you and I speak in Afghanistan.
Yes. Having a similar situation in Afghanistan, a vacuum which then will be attempted to be filled in by the region, which could bring different neighboring countries into conflict, or where problems could then be exported from Afghanistan from different groups, which will be in a situation which is not stable because of the economic, political lack of infrastructure, is a serious problem which must be dealt with now.
History is a peculiar thing. It doesn't go away in a hurry. I mean, you can have Turkish troops come into Afghanistan far away, and there's been this huge problem in your year. There was Bosnia, and there's now Kosovo, and now Macedonia. All sorts of troops can be considered, but not Turkish troops, because they all echo of the Ottoman Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Orthodox Church and so on. So, I mean, talking of a dialogue of civilizations, when you runs into this kind of a historic wall.
Yes. Well, I think what you're saying is we all feel in politics, and particularly the effect of history on our emotions, our feelings, our preconceptions, and this can drive us very much to conclusions, some possibly valid, some possibly false. I think we need to put this thesis always to the test, first of all. And secondly, if we can, and this is, I think is very important, in the Balkans, I think we have been doing so more and more, is to be able to take one step from history and say, yes, there is this history. There are wounds, there is pain. We're not going to forget this. We're not going to forget this pain. But let us not relive it. Let us not try to fight the battles of our forefathers. Let us see if we can learn lessons for a better future for the next generations.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.